Listen and subscribe to The Table of Truth on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts.
Welcome, everybody, to The Table of Truth. This is Blerdlines. We are recapping The Expanse, the final season. We all watch it. It's one of our favorite shows. We wanted to have a recap of every episode that dropped. It's only 6 episodes, so it should be pretty cool. With me, as always, is...
This is Admiral Josh Thomas reporting for duty.
As well as...
This is D, the professor, here to drop some knowledge and unpack The Expanse. We love this show. We can't say it too much.
It's true. It's true. On recommendations of both these brothers, they got me to watch The Expanse, and I have not looked back. It is probably easily my top 3 sci-fi shows of all time. It will probably be number 1 by the time this ends. We'll see. But so what we're going to do is to kind of keep the format ready. We're going to always recap, like kind of give the synopsis of what the episode is. Last season ended on some crazy shit. So again, this is for people that actually watch The Expanse. Come ride with us. If not, it's not a big deal. But for season 6, episode 1, the Rocinante crew make a startling discovery on an asteroid. Avasarella and Bobby contend with the devastation of Earth. Drummer and her family must make a heartbreaking decision. On series, Marco and Philip are acting a damn fool. That is your episode 1 recap, fellas. How did you guys enjoy this episode?
Josh, you want to lead off?
Yeah, I mean it was solid. I think it was like a nice bridge. It didn't necessarily cover a ton of ground. Like it didn't exactly plunge ahead into new territory. It seemed like it was more of a bridge episode, sort of like hey, so Marco's dropped, an asteroid on Earth, and this is the aftermath kind of a deal. It seems like at the end of last season, with everybody sort of being scattered and then coming back together towards the end of the season, it sort of ended off on, okay, so, he dropped an asteroid on Earth. Now we're retaliating and we're figuring out whatever. It seems like there was a little bit of a time jump at the end of the season. So it didn't really, I think that last half of that last episode was sort of reactionary. You know what I mean? Like this is the reaction to everything that's gone on. And it seems like another time jump, not a major one. I think, from what I remember in the episode, it was a couple of months that they jumped ahead. And it seemed like it was like, all right, so this is what's going on and this is where things are at, and not necessarily like any big plot changes or plot arcs. The reaction to Clarissa, we were just talking about that off camera. The reaction to Clarissa being on the ship for a little while. The Rossi sort of being sort of like the freelance vanguard of sorts. To try to deal with things. There's a couple of little things that now that the Rossi's sort of legitimized, and sort of a free agent of the Earth government. That was interesting to see. But it didn't really cover a ton of territory. It just sort of refamiliarized you with the characters, gave you like a little bit of the aftermath of how things ended in the last season. But it was fun.
It didn't seem like a season premiere. It was like almost like a cleanup. Like it was just kind of like, hey, just to let you guys know what's going on. This is this.
Yeah, just reintroducing.
Yep, reintroducing. Everyone's doing that. I thought that was like, it was good though, because I went back and rewatched the season finale. And then also more just because my favorite scene of all time is when Amos is about to have Peaches onto the ship. And he was like, remember you were trying to kill me and then we were cool and now we're good. We're family, right? He's like, yeah, cool. Mm-hmm. Peaches, we good. She's going to stay on the board for a little bit. I got some shit worked out. Don't even worry about it. I got you. And you just see Holden not saying a word for 2 minutes. And
it's
he's
amazing visual.
He's like, what just happened? What? Yeah. But she was trying to kill.
Yeah, the body language of the actors is just, it's just master class. We use that all the time, but these actors just get it where they need to, they understand what each scene needs, and they deliver every time. But yeah,
well, I don't know if you guys noticed, but it also helps that the actor who plays Holden is one of the producers on the show.
True. Yes.
True.
It helps immensely. I have a feeling that really translates really well.
Yeah.
And that's Stephen Strait, and also
Stephen Strait. Thank you.
He's I think he's directed a few episodes.
Oh,
nice. Maybe he hasn't, but I know that Thomas Jane, who was previously on the show as
he has. He directed a couple episodes.
Yeah, he's directed some of the episodes. I think a few episodes. An episode last season.
Yeah, and I think that helps to it, because I think at the end of the day, like, you can tell this is like one of those shows, because it's so like heady sci-fi, that it really is, the people involved actually really, really care about the show, like want to make it well. And everyone, no one's in there just haphazardly, I'm just getting a check. They're actually like, I actually care about the show. I want this to do well. And because it's such a niche, because it's a very, very sci-fi show, as you know, you'll go into later, but so people that are into it, like they're okay with the quiet moments. It's like, we don't necessarily need to see gun battles every single day. We could have like conversations and all that. So I think for this episode, I thought that was dope, that they kind of like, again, quick check in to see where everyone was at. But it was also good to see the aftermath of how a character like Philip is taking, like, you know, he's quote unquote a hero, and now he's definitely not taking it well. He's smashing chicks now, because he wasn't doing that before. But it's just very just like loveless, and just you know, I'm just getting whatever I'm doing. His dad didn't take him seriously. No one else takes him seriously. He's just kind of like almost like the trophy son at this point.
Yeah, and you know, adding to that, I think I wrote in my notes that, you know, what we're seeing in Philip is, so he sort of goes through this life as they established before he even gets on screen, where his mother abandoned him. Naomi abandons him when he's an infant. And she doesn't, there's nuances to that, right? She doesn't just say, I don't want a child, I'm going to go do my thing in the stars or whatever. It's because of Marco and the fact that he used her to commit mass murder. Fast forward to Philip, who didn't understand that last season, but by the end, and as we see with the recap, the opening montage that you know directs us to what we need to pay attention to in this episode, he had the neglect side of it, but then there's also the emotional and psychological abuse wreaked on him by Marco, at the hands of Marco. And you saw that not only, so you have the vigor of youth bumping into up against a teen or a youth individual, an adolescent, as far as Belters go, who again is psychological and emotionally abused. We see that, and here's some spoilers, just some specifics in the scene. But there's a moment where when we first see Philip, for the first time, as Cam alludes to it, he's sort of randomly smashing these Belter chicks, and obviously it's because he's Philip Anaros, son of Marco Anaros, and the leader of the Belt. Then he gets to the meeting late. And, you know, they have the actors knowing what scenes need. There's a shot where you see Marco reacting to him from behind as the girl as he's trying to pick up this chick, and she's kind of ignoring him. Later, when he finally wants to be involved with the conversation, Marco is like, tells his second man, you know, come on, I want to have this conversation in private. That's classic, the dynamic between those two, in which early on, Marco felt Philip had stolen some of his power from him. By going up late and by not being attentive to what was going on. Now, when Philip is finally ready to be attentive, Marco sees it as an opportunity to reassert his power over Philip by saying no. And in a way, it's consequence of a youthful decision, a bad youthful decision of Philip to go to the strategy meeting early.
Yep.
Now, when you want to be a part of it,
Yep.
the answer is no. But in Marco's way of doing that is like not just saying, well, earlier you didn't want to be a part of this. Now all of a sudden you want to. That's not how this works. Marco simply tells his commander, come with me. And as Philip tries to speak, he's like, in private. Let's finish this in private.
Exactly.
So biting and stinging, and it creates that moment that ultimately leads to Philip making that fateful decision that he does.
Yeah, and it like I said, it sunned him because you could tell the whole time he was kind of just like he's the man, but he's not the man. And so so that's why I think that at the end we was getting super drunk and just kind of like trying to hit on a girl that was obviously not feeling him, and understanding, because one, you could tell she's a little bit older. Two, she's hip to the game, and she was being to her credit, was being cool about it. But like, look,
absolutely,
that little game is not working on me. Here's a drink on me, chill, it's all good. And then when he got a little bit rough, and his homie was just like, "Yo, man, you got to chill out." That's when all that rage started coming out.
Yeah,
he needs to fix that brash decision.
To their credit, I feel like. I mean, and I think it's indicative of shows that came before it. I think early Walking Dead, all of Battlestar Galactica, they're all character driven. I think The Expanse sort of carries it to a different place, but they're all character driven, and it's really just characters in zombie apocalypse, characters in cyborg apocalypse. And in this one, it's a little bit more fleshed out, a little bit more, it's less clear cut and dry than a Battlestar Galactica or a Walking Dead. It's definitely, there's a lot going on. And, and I think where this show excels is it intertwines the characters into, like, the characters can't necessarily be separated so easily from what's happening. Whereas the subplot is always, in the other shows that I mentioned, the subplot is always what's happening with the characters. And the plot is always, whatever the main thrust of the show is. This is definitely way intertwined in terms of the two.
Yeah, no, it's a balance in that these things are not divorced from one another, right? So there's no narrative arc, no character development that you can separate and say, okay, if I took that out, everything will still work the same way. No, this is a fine-tuned machine that every cog, every piece of that machine is needed to talk to the other in order for this to work. Like a novel almost, and that's why it is very much in that same vein of a novel. And I know that's low-hanging fruit because, obviously it's an adaptation.
Yeah. And also I think too is like, I would say, because people ask me, they're like, oh, why is Expanse good? And I'm like, well, on top of the very heady sci-fi stuff, because, it's been widely known it's one of the most on brand, on science of a lot of the sci-fi shows. Like, it actually is putting a really big stamp on
science.
It's right. They really try to put the science in there, but they do a really good job of grounding it in reality and try to ground it in a certain level of human aspect of it. So so I think that helps it with a lot going overall, because like, we're still in space, we're doing all this stuff. There's a big overarching arc that's going on, but then you have quieter moments where when you're on the Rocinante and it's like Amos and Peaches and they have a good rapport with each other about like almost like mentor to mentee, maybe dating, maybe not, but they have a good rapport. And then you see the couple that's been a couple for the whole show, and they're in a very tense, almost frozen space because they both are like in this weird situation on themselves. And so you see that dynamic. And when Naomi lashes out at Amos is like, yo, you need to chill. This is obviously not about her.
Right. It's not about her. It's not about Alex. It's something else. It's and it's the tension of the fact, and Naomi calls it out, and this is again part of what through line of what we're all talking about here, and how you can't divorce even the things that are considered past narration in the story. When Naomi points out the fact that what's weird for her is that she tried to run away from all this, and then
Mhm.
Marco brought her back into it, and now she's now forcing her to hunt down and kill the people that she once called family, and so that's, like you said, going to back to reemphasizing how much of a character-driven but balanced narrative that this is. All of those things cannot divorce one from the other. Marco traumatized her in their youth, and then now again as adults, and doing the same thing to her son. There was a few things I just wanted to point out. I do believe that it was 187 days, so that was like a couple months. I think that's what it said. That
it was like
87 days,
6 months or something like that.
Yeah, after what we saw in season 5.
Yeah.
So that was definitely not a lot of what they showed with that sort of montage of kind of showing you, like you said, bringing you up to speed. But there are a few things to note about their sort of setup. So the one thing is that Marco, his position is very tenuous, right? So the conversation on series where he's talking about, Fred Johnson is dead, Anderson Dawes is dead, history has moved on with them, where Sandrini, who's the new administrator, is trying to get him to understand, bruh, we gotta make water and feed people now.
Yep.
This station that you were just calling the Belter capital, the capital of the belt, will starve in a few months if we don't figure something out. And what we know in this world about Belters is that they don't care about money and power in that way. What they care about are clean air recyclers, water, and crops. When you mess with
Basic
that,
survival.
Yep.
Exactly.
Basic survival. Yep.
So,
Basic survival.
Exactly. So that's an important moment when you see her trying to explain that to Marco and him dismissing it, and they cut to her the way she's like, all right, she's kind of like, all right, like you think, and she says it like, bruh, you dropped a rock on Earth. That is the only place in the entire universe right now that we know can produce the natural resources that supports human life.
Yep.
Now you've put it in a position where that planet might die sooner than it was expected, and that means that everything will have to be grown from shit. Literally.
Yo, and that's the part that's crazy to me, where it's like it kind of goes back to the thing where it's like you want to be the liberator, but you don't want to actually govern and all the other stuff.
Exactly.
And so now he did the big grand move. Now he has to deal with the politics of stuff. He got to read spreadsheets. He got to build a coalition and all this stuff. Where like he's just an activist. He's like the down on the road that just wants to like change things, but he doesn't want to actually govern.
Yeah. And to be honest, what he did more than anything was he shot up Earth and Mars, and they're wounded, but they're not dead by a long shot.
Oh, no.
He can't take the fight right to them, as we saw. And I think that is another way that this show sets things up. A lot, like you guys point out, a lot didn't go on, but a lot was set up.
Yep.
And was told to us without telling us. We were told that Marco, his position is not as firm as he wants to project, or that he is projecting. We were told that that the Martians are basically rebuilding, but it's becoming a slow process and a tenuous process. So the episode definitely didn't like come out and punch you in the face in terms of like action and excitement. And I do agree, I think it did feel more like, because having just watched episode 10, the season finale of season 5, and then watched straight through into season 1's premiere, it does, even though it's a few months, it does feel like just a continuation of the immediate aftermath of what we saw then. And that was fine because it wasn't lazy. It was done purposefully. And it does set up a whole lot in terms of what we even hold in reviewing the footage of the Barkeith, one of the MCRN ships that was breakaway ships.
Yep.
Getting what I like to call ate by the unknown aggressors as it transited through the ring space. And I love that moment again. What does Holden getting distracted by the big picture as he should, as everybody should be. But what does Amos say? Look, man, we can't deal with that right now. We don't know even where to begin with that. And I'm only here so that because I didn't want to leave you or abandon you. Do not do that to us right now. And that's important because when those sort of world ending, the stuff with the proto-molecule and the ring builders and all that stuff, Holden tends to stray off the course and go away, and it often causes it nearly wrecks everything. So I thought it was a great moment when Amos said, "Look, don't pull."
There is a logic to that, though, to the path his character takes with that, because he was actually there at the creation of it. Like he was in the thick of it.
Oh yeah.
So there's a certain logic to it.
Absolutely. There's a brilliant logic to it, and it's in line with his character. Of course, Holden, if he sees something like that, it's going to catch his attention. It doesn't matter if he's in a firefight with Marco, because in what clicks for Holden is what doesn't click for 98% of the other characters, which is that right there is a much bigger threat than Marco.
Yeah, exactly. And then Holden's pretty good at looking at the bigger picture anyways. Yeah. But you're right. You need the Amos to be like, yo, dude, that's cool. But right now we got to make sure we don't die.
Yeah. And they do that for each other. Early in the episode, when Amos, y'all got me saying it. When Amos is asking Holden if he thought they could get Avasarala to pay them for every time they took out one of those assholes, as he said. And Holden first is going along with it thinking he's joking, and it's like, "I'd love to see you try." And then Amos is like, "No, I'm serious." Like, and then you see
we broke
Holden, and you see him get dead serious, where he's like, "Nah, man, we not mercs. You know, we doing this because we represent one of the only like true like heroic stances in this entire thing. Like the Rocinante doesn't fly any specific, even though it's closely related to Earth and the UN, it doesn't fly any particular colors. You could say that it's done more work for the belt than anything, but it's, they are the true heroes of the story. If that even applies, hero,
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's what's cool, because like Amos always gives him the real, keeps him grounded a little bit, but then also Holden makes sure that he doesn't go full psychopath.
Exactly. That's the best way to put that. Yes. He just make sure he doesn't be too goody two shoes.
Yep.
Holden make sure he doesn't go off on a killing spree.
Exactly. And then now if you put in what's going on with Drummer, and she's like, she's now her ship is now the lone soldier out in the world trying to survive, because now everyone, all the other Belters are pretty much either dying or joining up with Marcos.
Right.
And so it's interesting to see her now, where she's kind of like, okay, I know what I'm. Again, she's always putting that rock in a hard place, where she knows what she wants to do, but she also is trying to be good for the people on her ship and stuff like that, which also I think is a dope character. And it also shows her again, her fluidity of her lovers and how they balance her and how she hey, I'm out here, son. 2021. Now,
ladies and gentlemen, what he just did.
Now turning to Marcos, where again we see him, he's drinking more. Mm-hmm. He's disinterested in the day-to-day of the movement.
Yeah.
And he's openly dismissive of his child, because now he finally has reasserted dominance now.
Right.
And so it's interesting to kind of see that, because we saw for a whole season of him being very rah-rah and very like almost like prophetic. And then now the human part of it is starting to seep in now, where he's just like, what? Wait, you just got me coffee? Ugh.
Yeah. And that moment was great too, because that was the showing the visual foil of him versus Holden.
Yes.
Because we see Holden all the time, and we know that that character loves coffee. And then I thought that it was interesting that Rosenfeld gave it to him in the same way that you were accustomed to seeing Naomi handing Marco handing Holden a bowl of coffee when he's contemplating or he's trying to decide on some big decision and all that stuff, and all of the important things that they've done over the sea. So I thought that was a really neat visual parallel that because to draw that attention to coffee as the way they did with Marco and the way he reacted to it, and I thought that was clearly the writers and the directors and saying, hey, you guys look at Marco being all Holden over here, here, exactly. and it totally worked because those two are such foils of one another for so many, 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 many reasons.
Yes, exactly. And I think that was cool to show that.
Sorry. I was going to say, I think you put it perfectly earlier on, D'Angelo. Marco's an activist and not an administrator.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like
and they're sort of putting that front and center now.
Yeah. It's like that example that I think in Game of Thrones when Tywin Lannister, they always talked about Robert. It's like, yeah, he was good at winning the crown, but he was terrible at ruling. Like that's sort of Marco, and that he and to be honest, he hasn't even won the crown all the way, because there's a reason he's not engaging the UN and MCRN forces. It's because he can't. Even with the amount of ships that he's got, and they're great ships because they're MCRN ships, which means that they're by and large better than all of the UN ships. But the reason he can't do that is because those nations are still nations.
Yeah.
They are still established. They still have minds and intelligence that can use very little and get big results. He had to use a lot of big things to get his big result, which is Martian tech, not to mention freaking asteroids and all that stuff. If he hadn't coated them with stealth, they would have shot every single one of them down. And so that's why he has to put on that front. He has to exert the little power that he has, because Marco didn't set out to build a nation. He set out to be a conqueror. And at the end of all that, he doesn't know which way next to go. But that's why he says, don't you miss the fight? And old girl reminds him, oh, brother, the fight's going to come. You should be trying to think about other stuff, like governing, like the fight is coming.
Yeah.
Because at some point, those ships that you see sitting there for blue and red, they're going to start pushing out and they coming.
Totally.
No, they're never going to let just the Marco get away with what he did. He's a dead man walking.
Pretty much.
And
100%.
And they all know that but he's the only one that is kind of not understanding the things that he should be doing to keep that from happening. Because if you build a Belter nation and solidify it, then maybe you stand a chance when they get back ready to go. And there's also something else in the back of his mind that he's thinking about as his insurance policy as to why he's not worried.
Yeah, true.
That band, we can talk about that.
Yeah. Well, and then lastly, we have Avasarela and Bobby, who are clearly bored because they're just like, Bobby for sure, because she out here, like she was like, bench pressing niggas for the longest time, and now she's in a political role. So she over here chilling And then so again, she's in a good place. And she actually should be with Avasarala. It makes you feel more safe. Old lady needs like a right hand, but at the end of the day, you can tell that she's just like, ugh.
Yeah. Little cool visual, Bobby standing on Earth, perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Again, showing, and that took like what, 3 seasons?
Well, yeah, I mean, ideally, because she hadn't spent much time on Earth before we saw her go to Earth the first time. And for those of you who are kind of casual viewers or are mildly interested, thing is, Martian gravity is a lot. There's less gravity on Mars, so they grow up without a real horizon and things that orient them to that horizon. So that makes it a little tougher when a Martian has to set foot on Earth, and now there's a horizon, there's an ocean, there are things that ground you, and besides the gravity itself.
Yep. And I thought that was a cool thing when they showed that when the Martians came to Earth and they all were kind of like queasy, they could barely walk. It was like they had to really adjust themselves, and they never really were really quite cool with being on Earth because they had been in a place that was a lot different. And so those little small touches are actually, to me, that which makes it really, really cool. Or like when the Belters go down to Earth and they have they literally can't stay there for longer than a short period of time because it fucks with their whole situation.
It's literally, for a Belter setting foot on Earth, it's literally like them trying to hold up I don't even know what that weight would be. Like, it's like them trying to, a person that weighs 100 pounds soaking wet trying to bench press 500 pounds. That's what it feels like. It would feel like for a person who didn't grow up in a gravity well to suddenly set foot in a place that has a lot of gravity.
And then also too, even I know when astronauts go to space, they always grow like a little bit more because they have no gravity.
Yep.
And so
they have to be worked through reacclimating so that they don't get decompression sickness.
Yep.
Crazy. So, but yeah, I like that's again, it goes back to some of the cool things about Expanse, where it's like this is definitely a very sci-fi show, less on the fantasy aspect of it. And I think they reward you by paying attention and you start to see the whole situations. And as you picked up on the nuances, the last thing I was going to say is at the beginning of the show, we have a vision of Laconia, and you have a little girl. She's playing with some really weird looking animals. She's just like kind of out here living her life. And it was funny because like, I was just like, who is this chick on this show that I was like, I was like, I haven't seen no aliens in this whole show. And then I'm watching the season finale. And I'm like, wait, what's going on? Is this the right show?
yeah. Very cold open.
Yeah, but I had to remind myself, I'm like, oh, that's right. The Rogue Nation of the Mars Cats, they were just on some other shit, and they built their own situation with the protomolecules. So I'm like, all right, we back, people.
Yeah, not a wasted scene.
Not a wasted scene. I think one of the things I would say for Expanse in general is like the writing is really strong and their pacing is good, but it's very deliberate. And so a lot of times when I recommend the Expanse to people, I'm like, look, if you're looking for something that's going to keep your attention all the time, and it's like, bam, bam, someone's happening, someone's dying, there's always action. I was like, this is not that show. It's there. But they have a very deliberate pacing. They have everything they do is with intention. So whatever they build it. And so, you watching for the first season, by the end of the season, you see all the payoff that would happen in that first episode. That if you went back to the first episode, you're like, oh. Yeah.
That everything is perfectly set up in that first episode. You really just have to allow yourself to. It's just like reading a book. When you read page to page, there might not be a lot of excitement going on. But when you sit back and you think about what led to that big chapter where it's like, oh, then you're like, okay, that made that journey worth it because it was actually building to something, and none of that stuff that I thought was like trivial was actually trivial. It was actually very, very, very meaningful.
Well, I think they do a good job of following the novel, frankly, and making the novels work for a television series because it doesn't follow the traditional television. Okay, so we're in Act 2. There needs to be action beats here, and it doesn't necessarily follow the usual structure watching Star Trek today, like first act is, this and second act is that. And it just sort of follows a certain television-y pattern. Most shows do that. But The Expanse definitely does not. It kind of marches to the beat of its own drum.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm like, who's that random chick? And then they're not going to tell me until like episode 4.
Nope.
Word.
Yeah, and it's really good. It's the great example of serial storytelling. Like it's just where one thing it's picking up from where the last thing left off. Everything that you've seen before still matters. Like that stuff is rare, and especially in today's television climate. But it's a really rare commitment in storytelling to have that, to be patient, even as a writer or as the people who are penning it, because I think one of the sort of early criticism for both books and shows that, there's no villains, there's no antagonists. And it's like, no, there are antagonists. You just have to...
Give it a second.
There are villains, but you just have to not see them as villains and as antagonists. And by that, I mean that their goals are just opposite of the protagonist's goals, who are also not to be viewed as heroes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like these are I think it was George R. Martin who said it, or, it's been said, no one is the villain in their own story. And the Expanse treats its characters like that. Nobody considers themselves a villain. Those mad scientists who were experimenting with the protomolecule, feeding an entire station of human beings to them to see how it reacted to it. In their warped sociopathic mind, they were not the villain. They were doing that to advance humanity or to protect humanity or something. So those sacrifices, sacrifice few is to say the many. And the Expanse really does a great job. I think better than a lot of stories, because I think A Song of Ice and Fire is good like that. But in the show, they at a certain point, they cross over to, okay, that's just evil.
Yeah, exactly.
Like there is no humanity behind it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that like you said, the antagonist versus the villain is actually really interesting, because if you took this show and looked at it from the Marcos situation, it's the scrappy rebels going against the big Imperial trying to do something, and that changes the whole dynamic of the show.
Yeah.
Or if you just take it from Avasarala, who's the politician, has to corral all these crazy people together and actually, she hates people, but she's actually good at governing.
Right. Right. She's the most misanthropic heroine that the earth has probably ever seen.
100%.
Like, hates people, but absolutely will do everything it takes to protect them and save them. And I think that's what those layers upon layers is what really, again, does it for me with all these characters, because no one character, probably Holden is probably the only character who can be painted with a single broad stroke, and that is he's very much the Clark Kent of the story. Yep. And even he grows beyond that as the story progresses. I love Holden in books 7, 8, and 9. Favorite version of Holden. Books 6 on back to 1. I hated that character. I hated him. He was a great character, but I hated him just because he was it was always too much.
He was a Boy Scout.
He's a Boy Scout. Every time there was something that had to be done, needed to be done, here you go, Holden. Gotta make sure it's on the up and up. Gotta make sure it's the right thing to do. I'm like, God, son, you're in space. There's aliens everywhere. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Throw that rule book out the window. You got a gunship. You should be having people worship your feet now. But yeah. Great episode. Holden is better now, and I think that's the beauty of those characters. They can't be painted with a broad stroke.
Yeah, and I would say the last thing I would say on that is like the character development of all the characters have been super interesting. Where I think each character has gone through an interesting arc, and you like them or hate them more by that arc. Like for me, I hate Naomi. She's fucking annoying. Literally, her one decision was the whole of season 5. Like that one decision was the catalyst for a whole story arc. And she was the center of it that actually caused the death of certain characters and this and that. And I'm like, man, So you trying to get mad at somebody else is kind of small.
Yeah, no, and they've all had those moments where they've done something that's caused a great deal. Holden's was in the very first, where he instead of not logging the Canterbury call, he logs it and lies about it, and then causes them to have to go out. Canterbury gets killed. Shit, the medic gets killed. Which I always thought the fact that they never replaced the medic on the show, it was just such a funny thing as a sci-fi nerd, because every science fiction show, all the greats.
Always has a doctor.
The not so greats. If there is a ship in space in vacuum, there's a doctor, and that doctor is always important and always usually survives and always is needed. But Expanse is like, nah, we got an auto doc.
Yep,
and always conveniently.
if you can travel in space, if you can travel light space, I think you can get an auto doc. You can have an auto doc. No need for the medic.
Exactly. I was actually surprised when the medic died. I was like, wait, whoa, that was weird.
Oh, and did he die? At least he didn't notice anything.
Seriously. But,
at least
really?
he didn't feel nothing.
So, all right, to wrap this up, is there anything else you guys want to wrap for this particular episode?
Say it again.
Is there anything else you want to say about this particular episode? And expectations? Because we only got 5 more episodes left. At the end, D'Angelo actually read the book and read all the books, so we can have him go on a crazy deep dive at the end of the season. Right. But for this one specifically, is there anything else you guys want to say about it?
I did want to go in a little bit without giving anything away on the Laconia stuff, because I think, talking to you guys, I do think that out of context, the Laconia stuff is being built really nice, but it's very MacGuffin-y right now, where it isn't. It's only in a very small way impacting the main narrative. And I do not think that, from everything I've read, that Laconia will, even though this is the last season, will play a big role. I think the last 3 books, even though it hasn't been announced, will either be picked up for continuation somewhere else, or Amazon is planning some kind of movies. They have to be, because there's 3 more books. That's like a hell of a finale to that story, more so than what we're going to see with the end of this arc. That going back to season 5 and even season 4, so the through line of what we know about Laconia so far is that back in season 4, when Holden and the UN science ship and the Belters, when that whole season, basically there was a group of Martians watching them and watching what was going on. And they were also at the same time engaged in black market deals, and they were selling weapons and things to Marco, all been established. What they eventually discover is that the Martian separatists found out something about when they saw what happened with Illis and the protomolecule, even just a little bit activating those devices, they learned something about that, which, as Avasarala points out, like, why would they want to do that? And Holden says, well, maybe they know something that we don't. Fast forward to the last scene of the finale, where the admiral is about to shoot old girl for the bracelet, and he's talking about the fact that they're getting ready to embark on this militaristic dynasty in which they have no civilian world there. Like there's only the military that they brought with them. So if you fuck up, you're dead. Yep. That's just it. And then so what they preview in the end is the doctor who's originally the expert on the protomolecule, who was given to the Martian group as well as the protomolecule as payment for those ships and weapons.
Yep.
And what we see is that this fool has already started using the protomolecule to activate shit on the planet.
Man, listen.
And then fast forward again to, and then they show you the structure above the planet, and then fast forward to episode 601, where we get the cold open, which is from one of the novellas called Strange Dogs. You look like a dog, in the episode when she tells the preacher it looks like a dog. That girl is really important. She's really important.
Okay.
And the person she's calling for, Zan, he's important too. But that's Laconia, and that's where the breakaway fleet, when they left and they betrayed Martian, that's where they settled. And thing to keep in mind is that they have with them a fleet of Martian heavy Doniger class ships. Think of it like this: they got about probably several dozen Rocinantes.
Yeah.
Like those type gunships, those frigates that can move quickly, and then they got several dozen of the big ones. So they took an entire fleet of military weapons, scientists, mines, all of them broke away from Mars and the reason they did it is because when the ring gates opened, Mars basically died. Mars died.
Pretty much.
The whole point of that was that they had a generational goal to make Mars a livable biosphere. And since there are now all these planets that they have access to where you can breathe fresh air, who wants to live under a biosphere and watch their children grow and die and have to. So that was the motivation of the breakaway fleet. What they did was partner with Marco and basically engineered the greatest terrorist attack in the history of mankind. The mind behind that has already been mentioned. Duarte, who has not appeared, but he is arguably at this point the primary antagonist of the story. So because he is the mind behind Marco, and that, as I mentioned earlier, as Marco, his whole reason that he's not really concerned is because he understands that behind the scenes he thinks he had Laconian backing.
He has a whole nother. He got backup.
Right.
At the end of the day, and I think that's the thing that makes it more interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that we'll leave it at that for episode 1. We'll be back to recap episode 2, and then we'll do every episode a day or two after it to kind of, and then throw it back up there. But yeah, let us know what folks thinks. We're already enjoying it, as you can see, without even getting into crazy of the books and all that stuff. But Blerdlines, and we are out. Deuces.
Peace.